This is my true story. I gave my son everything I owned so he could live with comfort and pride. I trusted him with my savings, my gold, and my love. But one day, I found out he had sold every piece of my jewelry, the gold I saved from my youth, just to pay for his vacation. My heart didn't break. It hardened. He thought I would forgive him like always. But this time, I didn't cry. I planned. And what I did next left him with nothing. Before that, tell me where you're watching from and what time it is right now. And please subscribe so my story can reach more people. He came to me one evening, looking tired but smiling. He said he needed some money for emergency repairs. I didn't think twice. He was my only son. I had raised him alone after his mother died, worked through back pain and long nights just to give him the life I never had. He had his own house now, a wife, children, everything I had hoped for him. When he asked for help, I felt proud that he still came to me. I told him I didn't have much left, just my small pension and a few gold pieces I had saved from my younger days, my wedding ring, his mother's bangles, a chain I wore on special occasions, and a few old coins I'd kept as memory. He nodded, said not to worry, said he would take care of everything. I gave him the keys to my drawer. That small gesture, one I thought showed love, became the biggest mistake of my life. Days passed, and he never mentioned the repairs again. He looked happy, lighter somehow. I asked him once if everything was fixed, and he said yes. I believed him. A father always wants to believe his son. But one morning, when I went to take out the chain his mother gave me, the drawer was empty. Every piece of gold, every memory tied to our life together, was gone. The small boxes lay open, hollow, cold. I thought maybe I misplaced them, maybe I forgot where I put them. But after searching every corner of the house, I knew. He had taken everything. I sat on the bed, holding the empty box. My hands were shaking. The smell of old wood filled the room, the same drawer that once held our history. I felt like someone had stolen not just my gold, but every piece of love I had carried for him. I called him, but he didn't answer. I sent a message. No reply. Later that night, when I turned on the TV, I saw his photo on social media. Smiling, wearing sunglasses, standing on a beach with his friends. The caption said, "Finally taking the trip I deserve." I stared at that screen for a long time. I wasn't angry yet. I was numb. That gold wasn't money to me. It was memory. It was the bracelet his mother wore when she held him for the first time. It was the ring I wore the day I buried her. And now, he had sold it all for a few days of fun. The neighbors came by that week asking about him. They said he looked happy. They said it must make me proud to see him doing so well. I smiled and nodded. I didn't tell them that my wrists were bare because my son had pawned my life for a vacation. That night, I sat alone, staring at the empty space where my safe used to hum quietly beside my bed. I didn't cry. I had cried enough in my life. This was something different, something colder. It wasn't about gold anymore. It was about betrayal. He thought I was old, slow, weak. He thought I wouldn't notice. But as I sat there, my hand brushed against the corner of my old wooden box. Inside was a file, the deed to his house. He had begged me years ago to co-sign the loan. I had helped him because that's what fathers do. I never removed my name from the papers. That night, I realized something he didn't. The same trust he had broken was the same trust that gave me the power to end his comfort. I still had my name on his home. I still had my pride. He took my gold for his pleasure, but I still had something stronger than gold. I had the law, I had the papers, and I had nothing left to lose. That night, the house was quiet. The ceiling fan made a dull ticking sound, and the clock on the wall kept reminding me how slowly time can move when your heart is heavy. I sat on the floor beside the open drawer, empty boxes around me, my old life scattered in pieces. The air smelled of metal and dust, the smell of things that were once valuable but are now just memories. His laughter echoed faintly from the porch. He was on a call, talking to a friend, bragging about his trip of a lifetime. I could hear every word. He spoke about the ocean, the food, the hotel. He sounded proud, as if he had earned it. I looked down at my hands, old, wrinkled, shaking, and I realized I had been too soft for too long. He had used my love as currency. He had turned my sacrifices into his spending money. I thought of his mother's ring, the one she wore every day until the end. I remembered how I used to polish it carefully and keep it safe, planning to give it to his wife someday. But now it was gone, sold, melted, forgotten. I didn't shout. I didn't confront him. I just sat there, letting the truth settle in. I had lost my wife once to fate. Losing my son to greed felt worse because this time I was still alive to feel it. Hours passed. The house grew colder. I opened the small metal safe near the corner of my room. The same one that had survived every storm, every hard year. Inside, among old papers, I found the one thing he had forgotten: the original deed to his house. I pulled it out and placed it on the table. The paper was yellowed with age, but the ink was clear. 2 names were printed on it: his and mine. I remembered the day we signed it. He was nervous then, grateful, full of promises about paying me back. He had said, "Dad, one day this house will be yours." He didn't know that those words would come true, just not in the way he imagined. I read through the document line by line. My name was still there, legal and binding. Half the house still belonged to me. I had kept it that way because I didn't trust his decisions at the time. I didn't think I'd ever use it, but now it felt like the last piece of control I had left. I placed the paper back in its folder and stared at it for a long time. I thought about my life, the years of labor, the nights without sleep, the sacrifices I made so he could go to college, so he could have what I never did. And this was my reward: betrayal dressed as success. I stood up slowly, my knees aching, but my mind clear. For the first time in years, I didn't feel weak. I felt something different: purpose. He thought age made me blind. He thought love made me soft. But he forgot one thing: time teaches patience, and patience teaches strategy. I turned off the lights and sat by the window, watching the moonlight fall across the table. The deed lay there like a quiet weapon, one that didn't need anger or noise to be used. When I finally went to bed, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the moment he would realize what he had done, and what I was going to do. He had taken my gold, thinking it would make him rich, but I still held the key to the roof above his head. He had taken from me with greed. I would take from him with silence. By morning, I had made my decision. He wanted to live free of consequences. I would show him what freedom costs when you take it from the wrong man. The next morning, I woke up before the sun. The house was quiet, and the air felt heavy, like it knew what I was planning. I made tea slowly, letting the kettle whistle longer than usual. My hands were steady now. The shock was gone, replaced by something colder: focus. He came into the kitchen, yawning, scratching his head, smiling like nothing had happened. He said good morning and started talking about the trip, the beach, the hotel, the parties. His words filled the air like smoke, light, meaningless, choking. I watched him sit there, proud of what he had done, proud of how easy it had been to fool me. I stirred my tea and nodded. He laughed and said he would be going out later to meet friends. I smiled back. It was a small smile, the kind you give when you know something the other person doesn't. As he talked, my eyes went to his hands. He wore a new gold watch, not real gold, just plated, shiny enough to make him feel powerful, fake enough to match his heart. My fingers twitched around the cup. I remembered the weight of my bangles, the shine of my chain, the way his mother's wedding ring used to catch sunlight. Those were real. Those were earned. He finished his breakfast, thanked me for the tea, and walked out humming a song. I stayed seated, listening to the sound of his car starting. The engine roared, and then the house went quiet again. That silence was my answer. That silence told me it was time. I walked to the cupboard and pulled out the old file again. The papers looked the same, but today they carried new meaning. My name on that deed wasn't just ink. It was justice waiting to be signed. I placed the file on the table, poured another cup of tea, and sat down with a calm I hadn't felt in years. He had no idea. He thought he had won. He thought I was too old to fight back. But what he didn't understand was that people like me, people who build from nothing, learn to fight quietly. Not with fists, not with anger, but with patience and paper. When he returned that evening, he was cheerful again. He brought food, expensive and oily, and talked loudly while eating. I nodded, laughed at his stories, and listened as he bragged about his great vacation. Every word he said became a nail in his own coffin. I didn't mention the missing gold. I didn't ask where the money went. I just smiled and let him believe that I didn't know. Because silence, when used correctly, is stronger than shouting. He told me about the people he met on the trip, the drinks he had, the fun he'd never forget. I looked at him and saw not a man, but a boy who had never grown up. A boy who thought money came easy, who thought love meant permission. That night, when he went to bed, I stood by his door for a moment. I could hear him snoring, peaceful, unaware. I whispered quietly, not words of anger, not curses, just a thought. Enjoy your sleep, son. Tomorrow, you'll wake up to a different world. I went back to my room, folded the papers neatly, and placed them inside my old leather bag. My decision was final. I would go to the lawyer first thing in the morning. I wouldn't tell him. I wouldn't warn him. He took from me without asking. I would return the favor. I lay down and stared at the ceiling again. The night felt longer than usual, but this time, it didn't hurt. I wasn't grieving anymore. I was waiting for the dawn that would take back everything he stole from me, not in gold, but in peace. And when the first ray of sunlight crept into the room, I knew the silence had done its job. The time for words was over. The time for action had begun. The next morning, I woke up early, dressed neatly, and sat by the window watching the streets slowly come alive. The milkman passed, children walked to school, shopkeepers opened shutters, everything normal, except my purpose. Today wasn't going to be just another morning. Today, I was taking back what was mine. I took the brown envelope from the drawer and placed it carefully in my bag. The house felt strange as I walked through it. The walls he once decorated, the photos of him smiling, the echo of his laughter still clinging to the furniture. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. Then I remembered the empty jewelry box, and the pity disappeared. He had gone to work early, whistling as he left, confident and careless. He didn't even glance at me as he stepped out the door. That made it easier. I didn't want him to see my eyes. He would have noticed something was different. I locked the door behind me and walked to the bus stop. The morning air was cool, the sky bright, the world quiet. The weight of my bag didn't feel heavy. In fact, it felt lighter than my heart had in years. Every step toward the lawyer's office felt like a step toward freedom. When I reached, the receptionist recognized me immediately. I had been there years ago, the day we signed the documents for my son's house. The memory of that day returned clearly. His proud smile, his promises, the way he said, "Dad, you'll never regret this." I smiled faintly at how wrong he had been. The lawyer welcomed me in, offering me a chair. I told him I wanted to review the property deed I co-owned with my son. He pulled it up on his computer, scanned it, and nodded. My name was still there, as I had remembered. He said, "You still legally hold half the ownership, sir. You can make any decision on your share without his consent." Those words felt like music, calm, steady, final. I asked him what would happen if I sold it. He adjusted his glasses, looked at me, and said, "It's your right. You can sell your half, or since it's a single-family property, you can authorize a full sale and transfer ownership completely, as long as the paperwork is in order." I nodded slowly. My fingers rested on the envelope in my bag. "Let's begin," I said quietly. The process took hours. Forms, signatures, verifications. It all moved with the steady rhythm of justice. The lawyer explained everything carefully, and I listened, calm and clear. Each signature I placed on the page was another piece of the past I was letting go of. When the transaction was finally complete, He handed me the file. Stamped, sealed, official. The sale was done. The funds would be wired to my account by evening. It was clean, legal, and irreversible. I left the office and walked to the small tea stall nearby. I ordered a cup and sat on the bench, watching people go by. Nobody knew what I had just done. Nobody would believe that an old man sitting quietly with a cup of tea had just sold his own son's house. But I knew. And for the first time in years, I felt peace instead of pain. I finished my tea slowly. The sky had turned golden, and the breeze felt softer. I thought about what he would say when he found out. Maybe he'd shout, maybe he'd cry, maybe he'd finally understand what it feels like to lose something you took for granted. I didn't hate him. I didn't even want revenge anymore. I just wanted balance. He sold my gold, the last pieces of a life I built with love. So I sold his house, the comfort he built with lies. By the time I reached home, the money was already in my account. The phone buzzed with confirmation. I smiled and put it aside. Some messages don't need replies. That night, I slept better than I had in decades. Not because I was rich, but because, for the first time, my heart and my name were both my own again. The next morning, I woke up early again. The sun had barely risen, but I was already in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of tea filled the room, and the sound of sizzling bread made the house feel calm. Too calm. I laid the table just like always. Toast, eggs, and tea. Everything looked normal. That was the point. He walked in, yawning, stretching, wearing the same careless smile. He didn't notice the faint change in the air. He sat down, scrolled through his phone, and started talking about some new business plan he had seen online. He didn't look at me once. He never did anymore. I poured him tea, slow and steady, the same way I had done since he was a boy. He didn't thank me. He didn't even lift his head. He just kept talking, mouth full, bragging about what he'd buy next. A new car, a new phone, another trip. The sound of his voice used to make me proud. Now, it only made me tired. I nodded quietly and listened. Every bite he took reminded me of the gold he had sold. My wife's bangles, my chain, her wedding ring. I looked at his hand as he ate, the same hand that had once held mine as a child when crossing the road. Now it only held greed. He didn't notice the way I watched him. He didn't see that my eyes were calm, not angry. He thought silence meant weakness. He didn't know silence is where old men store their power. When he finished eating, he stood up, wiped his hands, and said he'd be out for the day. He picked up his car keys and laughed about meeting some friends. I smiled, just enough to keep him comfortable. Before he walked out, I said softly, "Enjoy your house while you still can." He laughed, thinking it was a joke. It wasn't. When the door closed behind him, I sat back in the chair and looked around the room. The table, the walls, the photos, all things I had helped him buy. All things that no longer belonged to him. He just didn't know it yet. I walked into his room, opened the drawer, and looked at the small trinkets he had left behind. Sunglasses, watches, receipts from restaurants, all signs of a man who never thought the world could turn against him. I didn't touch anything. I just looked and reminded myself why I had done what I did. The papers were signed. The sale was official. The house wasn't his anymore. He was sitting in comfort built on lies, and within hours, that comfort would disappear like smoke. I made myself another cup of tea and sat by the window. Outside, children ran to school, laughing, shouting, innocent. I thought about how I once carried him to school, holding his lunchbox, fixing his collar. I used to dream that one day he would take care of me the same way. Instead, he had taken from me. But I wasn't bitter anymore. I was done feeling small in a house I helped build. I was done being treated like furniture in the background of his success story. Today, I had rewritten the ending. When he returned, he would see the truth written not in words, but in papers. The world he lived in was built on my signature, and now that signature had erased his name. I stood up, took one last look around, and smiled. Not out of cruelty, but out of peace. He thought age made me blind. He thought kindness made me weak. He was wrong about both. As I washed the cups, The sound of running water felt cleaner, lighter, freer. I had done nothing illegal. I had done nothing wrong. I had simply returned life to its natural order. He had sold my gold for pleasure. I had sold his house for peace. And soon he would know the difference between the two. By noon, I was sitting in the same lawyer's office again, the place where I had once proudly signed papers to help my son buy that very house. The same desk, the same smell of files and ink, but everything felt different this time. Back then, I had walked in as a father giving his blessing. Now, I was walking in as a man reclaiming his dignity. The lawyer reviewed the documents again to ensure everything was clear. My hands didn't shake when I held the pen. I had held heavier things in my life, bricks, tools, caskets, but this pen felt like the sharpest of them all. I signed every page carefully, each stroke steady, final, silent. With every signature, I felt years of disrespect and humiliation fade away. He had no idea what was happening. He was out with his friends, drinking coffee, planning another weekend trip. He didn't know that while he bragged about his success, the foundation beneath him was quietly being sold away. The buyer was a quiet man, middle-aged, polite, and straightforward. He didn't ask questions about the story behind the sale. He only asked for the documents, verified the ownership, and nodded. His assistant prepared the payment transfer. The entire process felt like a storm moving through still air, invisible but unstoppable. When the lawyer confirmed the sale was complete, I didn't smile. I just exhaled, long and slow. It was done. The house that once stood as a symbol of his pride now belonged to someone else. My name was removed. His was removed. The walls he had decorated, the furniture he had chosen, the roof he had taken for granted. All of it was gone with one transaction. The funds reached my account before I even left the office. I watched the balance appear on the screen. A number that didn't bring joy, but closure. I didn't see money. I saw peace. I took a slow walk back home. The afternoon sun was harsh, but I didn't mind. My body felt light. My steps didn't drag the way they used to. I passed by a jewelry store on the way. In the window, I saw gold bangles gleaming under bright lights. For a second, I stopped. I thought about replacing what he stole, but then I realized I didn't need them anymore. The shine of those bangles couldn't compete with the quiet satisfaction inside me. By the time I reached the house, the street had grown busier. Cars honked, children played, neighbors waved. I nodded back, keeping my secret. Nobody knew that this house was no longer his. Nobody knew that by nightfall he would no longer have the right to open its doors. Inside, I packed a few clothes and my medicine box. I didn't plan to stay. I didn't want to watch the chaos that would follow. I had already called a cab to take me to a small rented place by the sea. Quiet, peaceful, far from the noise of disappointment. I placed a letter on the table, not of apology, but of truth. Just one line, written in my neat old handwriting. You sold my gold, I sold your house. Now we are even. The cab horn honked outside. I looked around the house one last time, the photos, the curtains, the walls. I didn't feel pain, only emptiness, the kind that comes when a long fight finally ends. I locked the door, left the key under the mat, and walked away. Not once did I look back. Some endings don't deserve witnesses. By evening, when the buyer's men arrived, they began repainting the gates, changing locks, clearing the driveway. The house was no longer his. It was no longer mine. It was just a building now, stripped of memory, stripped of loyalty. Some lessons can't be taught with words. They have to be signed in ink, sealed with silence, and delivered through consequence. When he came home that evening, the sun was already setting. I was gone by then, but I could imagine the moment clearly. The car pulling into the driveway, the door swinging open. The confusion on his face when he saw strangers painting the gate a new color. The bags of tools by the door. The voices of workers moving furniture that wasn't his anymore. He must have thought it was a mistake. Maybe he asked the men what was happening. Maybe they ignored him. Maybe one of them handed him the letter I left behind on the table. I wish I could have seen his face when he read it. Just one sentence. You sold my gold, I sold your house. Now we are even. They said he went pale. He started shouting, asking where I was, demanding answers that didn't matter anymore. He called me again and again. My phone stayed silent in my pocket. I was sitting by the sea then, watching the waves crash against the rocks, the wind brushing against my face. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anyone's call. He called the lawyer next. The lawyer told him the truth. The sale was legal, final, and completely within my rights. Half the house had belonged to me, and I had chosen to sell it. There was nothing he could do. No appeal, no trick, no pleading could undo what I had signed. I heard later that he drove around the neighborhood that night, angry and lost, trying to find me. He must have looked through the windows, seeing strangers moving boxes, his wife crying, his neighbors whispering. The same people he used to brag to now watched him in silence. The proud man who had mocked me for being old-fashioned was standing in the street with nowhere to go. When he finally realized it was over, he sat on the steps, staring at the ground. Maybe for the first time, he understood what it feels like to lose everything. Maybe he thought about all the years I had spent saving that gold, the sacrifices I made to build that house with him. Maybe he thought about how greed makes a person blind until it takes everything away. He came to the sea once, a few days later. He found where I was staying. He stood outside the gate, eyes red, voice shaking. He didn't shout this time. He didn't demand. He just stood there, speechless. I didn't let him in. I didn't have to. Some doors stay closed for a reason. He said nothing, and I said nothing. Silence was enough. He finally walked away, head down, shoulders heavy. I watched him go until he disappeared from sight. That was the last time I saw him. People ask me if I feel guilty. I don't. He sold my gold for pleasure, for beaches, for drinks, for days that meant nothing. I sold his house for peace, something worth more than anything he could ever buy. He used to say gold shines only when you spend it. He was wrong. Gold shines when it stays in the right hands. Now, whenever I hear the sound of hammers or paintbrushes, I think of that day. The strangers repainting his gate. The shock that must have frozen him. The look of realization on his face when he understood that every action has a cost, even for sons who think their fathers are too old to matter. That evening, as the sun sank behind the sea, I sat quietly with a cup of tea. The waves were golden under the fading light. I smiled faintly, not out of revenge, but relief. He had taken my gold, but I had taken back my worth. After that day, everything he built began to crumble. His friends stopped answering his calls. His wife packed her bags and went to her mother's house. The bank froze his accounts after the property transfer went public. The same people who once smiled at him now crossed the street to avoid him. The man who laughed at my poverty was now tasting it one bite at a time. He called the lawyer again, hoping to reverse what was done, but the lawyer told him the same thing: final, legal, irreversible. He had nothing left to fight with. The house was gone. The gold was gone. His savings were gone. And for the first time in his life, his pride was gone too. He came back to the empty lot where the house once stood with my name still echoing in the papers. The new owners had changed the locks, repainted the walls, and removed every sign that he had ever lived there. He stood outside the gate for hours, holding the keys that no longer fit. I was told he just stared at them, the metal cold, useless, mocking him in his own hands. People started talking. They said I had gone too far. They said a father shouldn't do this to his son. But none of them saw the nights I sat hungry so he could eat. None of them saw the drawer where my gold once lay, empty and cold. They didn't see the look in his eyes when he told me my things were old, worthless, replaceable. They didn't see the way he laughed when I asked about them. He learned that money without respect is a curse. Every door he knocked on closed. The same world he used to boast to now turned its back. He begged old friends for work, but no one trusted him. His arrogance had made him enemies long before I ever signed that paper. Sometimes I heard about him through neighbors. They said he moved from place to place, renting small rooms, taking odd jobs, wearing the same clothes for weeks. I didn't feel joy hearing it. I didn't feel pain either. It was just balance. The same life he gave me, silence, coldness, and disrespect, had finally circled back to him. He once mocked me for fixing broken furniture to save money. Now he searched for broken furniture to sell. He once said my house smelled like old age. Now he slept in rooms that smelled like mold and wet clothes. Every insult he threw came back to him, heavier than before. I still kept the photo of him as a boy, the one where he was holding his mother's hand, smiling with innocence. Sometimes I looked at it and wondered when that boy disappeared. Maybe he never really grew up. Maybe greed took him before time did. I didn't wish him harm. I didn't wish him hunger. I just wished he would understand that when a father gives, he gives everything. And when that father takes it back, it's not revenge. It's education. I walked past the old neighborhood once, months later. His house, my house, looked different now. Clean, fresh, alive. The new owners waved, not knowing who I was. I smiled and walked on. The street felt lighter that day. The burden I carried for years, of guilt, of love, of betrayal, was gone. He had fallen not because I pushed him, but because he climbed too high on the ladder of his own pride. He thought his father was beneath him. He forgot that every step he took was built on my shoulders. And when I stepped aside, the fall was natural. That night, I sat by the window of my new room, watching the quiet city lights flicker. Somewhere out there, he was learning how it feels to start from nothing, the same place I began. Life had come full circle. The months that followed were quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't feel lonely. It feels earned. I moved to a small coastal town, far from the noise, far from memories that used to hurt. My new house was small, clean, and peaceful. Every morning, I sat by the window with a cup of tea, listening to the sound of waves instead of arguments. The sea became my company. It never asked for anything, and it never lied. I spent my days simply. I walked to the market in the morning, bought vegetables, smiled at strangers who didn't know my name. Nobody here cared who I was or what I had done. They just saw an old man living his days in peace. It was a good feeling, to be invisible for the right reasons. Sometimes, when the evening breeze carried the smell of salt and rain, I would think about my old house. I didn't regret selling it. A home filled with disrespect isn't a home. It's a prison. The house had lost its warmth long before I sold it. The day he sold my gold was the day that house lost its soul. I had just finished what he started. People ask if I miss him. I don't think miss is the right word. I remember him. I remember the boy who used to bring me water while I worked in the fields. The boy who would laugh when I carried him on my shoulders. That boy is gone. What replaced him was someone I no longer recognized. Someone who thought love was weakness and family was currency. You can't miss a ghost that chose to disappear. One evening I saw him again. He came to the town, maybe to find me, maybe by accident. He stood outside my small gate, thinner, quieter, older. His eyes weren't angry anymore. They were tired. He didn't speak. I didn't either. We just looked at each other. Two men who shared blood but not trust. He tried to smile, but it broke halfway. He looked around, maybe realizing that I had built a new life without him. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small gold coin. My coin. One of the ones he hadn't sold, maybe the only one left. He placed it on the gatepost and walked away. I didn't stop him. Some goodbyes don't need words. That coin sits on my shelf now. I don't see it as forgiveness. I see it as understanding. He finally learned what I had tried to teach him his whole life. That gold means nothing if your heart is empty. My life is quiet now. No shouting, no betrayal. Just the sound of the sea and the occasional cry of gulls. I buy fresh bread each morning, feed stray dogs near the shore, and watch the horizon change colors. I don't need much. Peace is enough. Every now and then, I think of his house. I wonder if he drives past it sometimes, looking at what used to be his, remembering how quickly comfort can vanish. I hope he learned that lesson, that greed builds nothing permanent. I don't hate him anymore. I stopped hating when I stopped hoping he would change. Hate ties you to the pain. Letting go frees you. Selling that house wasn't just an act of revenge. It was the moment I let go of a lifetime of disappointment. Now, when I look at the sea, I see reflection instead of regret. The waves come and go like memories, some soft, some rough, but all moving forward. That's what life is. You can't hold on to the tide. You just learn to stand firm when it crashes and stay calm when it retreats. And that's what I did. I stood firm. I let go. I found peace not in wealth, but in silence. A silence I earned the hard way. He sold my gold for pleasure. I sold his house for peace. In the end, we both got what we wanted, but only one of us learned what it truly cost. He chased comfort and found emptiness. I lost everything and found freedom. Life has a strange way of balancing itself. It doesn't always shout, it just waits for the right moment to return what you've given it. He used to laugh at me for being poor. Now he works long hours for strangers just to pay rent on rooms smaller than the one I sleep in. He once told me my hands smelled of sweat and dust. Those same hands built the walls that once sheltered him. He mocked the way I saved money, the way I reused old things. Now he wears the same shirt for a week and calls it getting by. The world teaches lessons I never had to speak aloud. I still think about him sometimes, not with anger, but with quiet acceptance. Every man has to face the truth of what he's done. For me, it came early, through hardship, through work, through humility. For him, it came late, through loss, through silence, through the echo of his own pride. We both walked the same road, but I learned to bow my head while he learned to beg. People ask me if I'd do it again. I don't answer. Some things don't need defense. Justice doesn't need to be explained. It just exists, steady and silent. He took from me what money couldn't buy: respect, memory, dignity. So I took from him what he thought could never be taken: his security, his ease, his pride. Not out of hate, out of balance. The house stands there still, painted new, with a different family living inside. Sometimes I walk past it when I visit the old town. I never stop, I never stare. I just glance once and keep walking. The world moves on, even when people don't. Now I live near the sea, in a house half the size but twice as peaceful. Every morning I open the window and breathe. No shouting, no noise, no greed. Just wind, waves, and the simple sound of being alive. I drink my tea, feed the stray cats that wander by, and watch the sunlight dance on the water. I may be old, but I am free. Freer than I ever was in that big house built on ungratefulness. He calls me sometimes. I see his name flash on the screen. I let it ring. There's nothing left to say. Love doesn't die, but it grows quiet when respect is gone. Maybe one day he'll understand that forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It just means the story no longer hurts. My life now is small, but it's mine. Every corner, every sound, every object carries peace, not pain. I sleep without fear. I wake without bitterness. That is wealth no one can steal. When I look at the last gold coin he returned, I smile faintly. It's not the metal that matters. It's the meaning. He gave back a piece of what he took, and maybe that's his way of saying sorry. Maybe not. Either way, it's enough. He sold my gold for a few days of joy. I sold his house for a lifetime of peace. And now, when I sit under the fading light of evening, I know I made the right choice. Because sometimes you have to lose what you love to regain who you are. Final thought. Never shame the hands that built your comfort. Never mock the old man who gave you his world. Because one day, when your pride runs out, you'll remember the walls you sleep under were once held up by those same hands. And if you break them, don't be surprised when they learn to build again, without you.